Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice, and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Each episode is a conversation with inspiring people who make wonderful contributions to our knowledge in these areas and spark curiosity and ideas to pursue. Join me, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
What we need to do is not start with why, but start with who, and the starting with who starts with you. You need to know who you are, what are your guiding principles, what are your core talents and skills, and when you've put in the effort to really do some hard thinking and choose those things, then you can surround yourself with people who share those values and who need your talents to help them move forward. And you will be better situated to find a why in whatever you decide it is that you're going to do. Purpose is not in that work. It comes through doing whatever work is right in front of you. So for me, it's start with who.
Hi there, Innovator. It's great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. I trust you enjoyed my conversations with Corey Wassell of Verse Wealth and with Brad Smith of Simplecast. Today on the InnovaBuzz podcast, I'm really excited to welcome as my guest Scott Perry, the founder of Creative on Purpose. Scott is a teacher, a musician, a coach in Seth Godin's Akimbo workshops, and he's the author of the Creative on Purpose Handbook, of Endeavour, and of the Stoic Creative Handbook. Creative on Purpose is a newsletter, a blog, a broadcast, a community, and a coaching program for people who are ready to fly higher in endeavours that make a difference. A quick promotional message from our sponsor, InnovaBuzz. We help coaches and consultants build professional credibility, engage their target audience, and connect with their ideal clients. That requires absolute clarity about who your ideal client is and how you can help them. To help you get absolute clarity about who your ideal client is, take a look at our Marketing Master mini class. In less than 30 minutes, you'll gain absolute clarity on your ideal client and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. Access the Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It is completely free and it's also accessible without you giving away your email. In our discussion today, Scott talked to me about what is a creative endeavour and how we can all make a difference in this world. We talked about how everything we do is about gratitude and choice, and Scott showed us how moving forward and keeping up momentum can be maintained with the smallest viable approach. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Scott Perry. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Floyd, Virginia in the USA, Scott Perry, who's the founder of Creative on Purpose. He's a coach, he's an author, and he hosts his own Creative on Purpose broadcast streams, which is YouTube Live and videos and a podcast series as well. So welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Scott. It's a real privilege to have you as my guest today.
The privilege is all mine, Jürgen. I'm really inspired by the work that you're doing and grateful for it and all that you're doing to make things better. And what a privilege to be able to speak with you today.
Now, you've been a professional musician for over 30 years, and now you also coach people in creative endeavours, and I'm looking forward to learning more about what you mean by creative endeavours. We kind of look at your background and think music, but it's a lot more than that. And you're also a coach in Seth Godin's Akimbo workshops. So that's another area I'm really looking forward to dig into that. And that's where we first met, right?
That is correct. And I'm an open book. So wherever you want to start is where I'm ready to go.
Okay, well, before we start talking about all things creative endeavour in a bigger sense, what prompted the change from professional musician to business coach?
That is a great question, and one that I ask myself fairly frequently. I came into playing the guitar fairly late in life, not until I went to college. So I was 18 when I really got started in earnest learning how to play. And I went to college to become a teacher, which is what I did immediately after I graduated. And then I found myself engaged in trying some other things. And all along in my early adult life, I was playing music kind of on the side, always playing out, playing in bands. And there came a point when I just decided soon after my first son was born that if I was ever going to make a run at trying to be a full-time professional musician, I had to do it sooner rather than later, because I just knew that other obligations and responsibilities, were coming fast. And I literally jumped into my music career with the idea I just don't want to be the age that I am currently and look back and wonder if I could have done something with it. So I kind of made a pact with my wife that I was going to try this for a year, and if it worked out, I'd continue doing it, and if it didn't work out, I'd go back to teaching or whatever else I needed to do. And it just turned out that playing music for a living is something I was able to piece together a living doing. I was, a passable guitar player and a passable singer and a pretty good promotion and booking agent for myself. And the combination of all those things just allowed me to enjoy supporting my family, doing work that I really love to do for a long period of time. I eventually decided to get out of full-time performing and move my family to Floyd, Virginia about 20 years ago. My boys then were about 9 and 5, I think. And I wanted to intentionally kind of get off the road and be a father. So I took up giving guitar lessons as my primary occupation and just playing music on the weekends. And that also proved to be something that I just had a natural affinity for, but something that I love doing even more than performing. And then I got hooked up with this crazy little enterprise called the Alt NBA, which is a program by Seth Godin. And I went into that program trying to level up my online guitar instruction platform, and exited that program having decided that I was going to quit performing for a living and deciding that I was going to build something entirely different. And what that became over the last 3 years is Creative on Purpose, which is a platform for helping others fly higher in endeavors that make a difference. Work that matters, work done with and for people that you care about, work that enhances your life while it's elevating the lives of others.
That's an interesting journey. So you kind of went from teacher to musician to teacher again, and then coaching.
Yeah, I think of it all really as teaching. Even as a performing musician, I was performing mostly blues, traditional blues from the 20s and 30s, and I saw myself as very much kind of a proselytizer and an agent and a teacher, that was showing how this music that I love so passionately, that was recorded by African American artists in the 1920s and 30s, was still relevant and still vital and still important. And I think in a lot of ways, I think all of us are teachers in one way, shape, or form. We learn with and from each other all the time. Sometimes it's through negative interactions, but oftentimes it's we all have a unique perspective and a unique set of talents, and the way that we interact with each other, if we lean into it with a proper consideration, we can learn a lot just from our everyday exchanges with the people that we are bumping into in our everyday lives.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, music is a very powerful medium to promote that learning from something that interests you, which you've outlined there really well. So thanks for sharing that. So what is it that you do today at Creative on Purpose, and why?
So again, Creative on Purpose is primarily dedicated to helping others fly higher in endeavors that make a difference. And I define endeavors that make a difference as work that is at the intersection of who you are, what you're good at, and where you belong. And that work is done with and for other people in an effort to make things better. And Creative on Purpose started off primarily as a blog and a broadcast, and it is still very much those things. There's over 600 people that are members of the Creative on Purpose community that are there for the most part just to get their weekly dose of insight and inspiration through the blog and through the broadcast. Recently, Creative on Purpose has also launched a membership-only community, and that is associated with 2 coaching programs: one-on-one coaching, which is done with me, and then group coaching, which is guided by me, but is done in month-long sprints with 4 participants who are ready to make a big leap and really lean into leveling up and making progress in whatever endeavor or enterprise that they're seeking to develop and deliver to help make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. And who do you help specifically? So who is your ideal client?
That I would say that Creative on Purpose is really for people that are ready to engage in an endeavor that they aspire to excel in, or are already engaged in some sort of endeavor, but are somehow finding themselves stuck or stalled and just need help breaking through obstacles, barriers, or challenges. It's not really for somebody that wants to spend a lot of time talking big talk and just learning things and talking about big ideas. Creative on Purpose is very dedicated to people that are ready to learn by doing, and I recognize that is not for everybody, but for people that are really ready to face challenges, face the resistance and the fear that is inherent in any worthwhile enterprise. Creative on Purpose is positioned to help those people frame their situation and circumstances, to help them dial in and discover the work that they're meant to do now, and then engage in doing that work in a way that helps them cultivate a greater sense of purpose, passion, prosperity, meaning, but done through the act of of engaging it in the work and stepping into possibility together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm curious. There's a lot in that, and we'll start to unpack some of that in a moment. But I'm curious as to the name Creative on Purpose. I mean, from what you've explained there, it really does capture that well. And I'm curious how you came to select that name and what it actually means to you beyond, like, what does it mean to you as a business that you're serving your audience?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you a quick backstory because it gives me an opportunity to practice the virtue of humility. When I exited Seth Godin's Alt MBA 6 in August of 2016, I knew that I was ready to let go of my life as a performer, and perhaps even as a guitar instructor, even though that was work I did and do deeply love doing. But I wasn't really sure what was next. What I kind of reacquainted myself with in that program was my love for writing and my love for teaching things outside of playing the guitar. And it reacquainted me with my long time since the age of 12 or 13 in the 7th grade, when I first came across Marcus Aurelius's meditation. I was really fascinated with Stoic philosophy. So I had been reading Marcus Aurelius for, at that point, almost 40 plus years. And so I was deeply interested in marrying that with this lifelong pursuit as a creative person, mostly through music, but through other things as well. So the first iteration of Creative on Purpose was called The Stoic Guitarist, and that went absolutely nowhere. And then while engaged in another program called the Marketing Seminar, which is a program I now coach in, I wrote a book called The Stoic Creative, and that was the next iteration. That manifestation took on a little, or gained a little bit of traction in the marketplace. The book sold well, and I began to grow my community as creative, or the Stoic Creative. And it was during a second run through the marketing seminar in the fourth session that I hit upon the brand's Creative on Purpose. Interesting to note that in the first marketing seminar, Seth Godin himself, when I announced my brand, the Stoic Creative, said, the Stoic Creative is not such a great idea. Stoicism is really misunderstood in terms of being a philosophy. It's associated with just grimly enduring life's, trials and travails. You might want to rethink that. And of course, Scott being Scott said, no, it's a great idea. I'm going to run with it. And, although the book did all right, it definitely did not do as well as it could have done because I was just so overtly, waving the Stoicism flag. When I rebranded to Creative on Purpose, number one, Seth was on my broadcast announced to the world that this was a brilliant brand. So I knew I kind of had a winner at that moment. And then I wrote the book Endeavour, which is a book about finding or discovering, developing, and delivering work that matters, told really through the filter of Stoicism, but it never mentions the term, and it doesn't overtly discuss the philosophy. It just kind of unpacks the idea of delivering better endeavors through a filter that's informed by Stoicism. And that book became an Amazon bestseller in the self-help category. And, I kind of knew that I was onto something then. So that's kind of a brief history of Creative on Purpose. So it only took 2.5 years of not listening to Seth Godin for me to find something that was going to work.
Yeah, I think if there's a lesson in that, then it's probably listen to what Seth says.
He himself will admit that he's wrong a lot, but he's right a lot too. And I have had the opportunity to eat a little bit of humble pie right in front of Seth. But he's been very supportive. Obviously bringing me on as a coach in his programs. He's mentioned the book in his blog, the book Endeavour. He has been just as a friend, as a mentor, as a teacher, as somebody that I am a contracted employee for. He has just been an immense help to helping me, break through the obstacles I was putting in my own way and creating something that's really starting to work.
All right, there's even more coming onto my list here to talk about. I was going to explore the idea of Stoicism a little bit with you and understand why is it something that's so misunderstood. I mean, to me, it means when I think of that, I think of determination and being at cause, taking responsibility for your own actions, and also, no matter what gets placed in your way, you're still in a point where you're going to take action and move forward. Why do you think it's got kind of a negative connotation?
I think Stoicism with a small s, just the common usage English word, really is about just kind of grimly enduring life's challenges, as opposed to Stoicism with a capital S, the ancient Hellenistic philosophy that began in Greece and came to flourish in the Roman Empire, which is a beautiful philosophy that is about mindfulness, is about presence, is about human beings being inherently social creatures that are born with the capacity for reason, who have a responsibility to themselves and to each other to help make the world a better place. And Stoicism is obviously in the middle of a little bit of a resurgence. There's a lot of books about Stoicism now. There's a ton of blogs. There's some Facebook groups, and there's a annual meeting called Stoicon that is drawing hundreds and hundreds of people to places like London and Athens and Toronto. But still, even within those who consider themselves modern Stoics in the philosophical sense, there's a lot about Stoicism that's not fully understood. And probably the biggest misconception is that Stoicism is about either pushing down emotions or becoming emotionless. And that is actually has nothing to do with the philosophical tradition. The philosophical tradition was very much about cultivating the emotions that promote our health, happiness, and well-being, and very much about overcoming the negative emotions that lead us to become angry or frustrated or cause suffering in any way. So it's, a philosophy that I've been studying for decades now, again, since I was in the 7th grade, and that was a very long time ago. And a philosophy that I learned something new about almost every single day, even though there is very little written record from there's almost nothing from the founders of the tradition, and what we do know comes from fragments of practitioners and students and teachers that came along long after the philosophy was founded.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned self-awareness, and I think that the recognition that we're all emotional humans, and that we all have emotions that, well, even anger or frustration as emotions certainly can get in our way, but they do serve a purpose, and sometimes it's appropriate to feel that way to do something creative or to do something that is actually good for the world. It's the self-awareness, I think, is the really important thing, isn't it? To be self-aware of what you're feeling right now, why you might be feeling that, and then to take ownership of that, and how do you take that and do something positive with it. And also, if you're looking at state, we were having a conversation the other day about state and how easy it is to actually change your state from, if you are frustrated or angry as an emotion, how can you change your state from being down to being up again?
Yeah, well, that's you've really landed on some essential points, and the self-awareness is really a huge part of it, because self-awareness allows us to put ourselves and our situation and whatever moment we're in into a context where we can actually see things as they really are, frame possibilities, and then choose from the choices that we really have, as opposed to what happens when the conversation, or when we are caught in the throes of negative emotions, or making kind of knee-jerk reactions to those things. And Stoicism is also very much about self-control, but also of service, that our job is not just to cultivate excellence of character within ourselves, but we are really charged as human beings to do the same for others. And that's, to me, the thing that is most relevant in this day and age, is that Stoicism is saying we have to do a better job of seeing, hearing, and understanding each other, and trying to help those that are suffering, are getting in their own way, and are, adding to the problems as opposed to adding to the solutions.
Yeah. Well, certainly, you mentioned service there, and I know that you're very strong on the whole philosophy of serving others, and that's how you actually learn and start to build something that is creative and that does make a change for the positive. So we come back to that a little bit later. I wanted to sort of come back to this concept of being stuck or being stalled? Because you mentioned that's, you help people get through that or get over what has them stuck or stalled. And you also mentioned in your journey that you had a point there where, you were stuck or stalled, and yet over the 3 years, I guess it is now, since you've come out of that old MBA where you made the change, you've written how many? 4 books, is it?
I've written 2 what I would call handbooks that are 100 plus pages. Then I have 2 shorter handbooks that are less than 100 pages.
So what did you do to work on yourself and the things that were keeping you stuck, so that you've turned it around to become so creative and productive?
Well, I think the moment that it really changed for me was actually before Creative on Purpose was even an idea, and that was late in my performance career when, I had been doing it for 15, 20, 25 years, and I was starting to find myself becoming one of those guys I promised I would never be. And that's the bitter, jaded guy that feels like he's never catching a break and that his career is going nowhere and not getting the breaks. And, when I first started as a musician, I played with, all sorts of established musicians. And, that was one of the things I noticed, that, amongst older players, was that if they hadn't achieved a certain level of success, then, it was always the world's fault, and nobody appreciated them enough, and the audiences were respectful enough, and blah, 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 blah. When I found myself having those conversations in my own head, I actually, kind of gave myself a timeout, and I reminded myself that this is not the work that I have to do. This is the work that I get to do, that this was a choice that I made. And regardless of how far up the ladder I made it in terms of success, the fact that I was able to support a family of 4 and support them in a way that provided them with all the things that they would have been provided with had I gone into professional life in a corporation or with my teaching, academic teaching career, was a pretty big win just all by itself, and that it was something to be grateful for, not something to gripe about. And that is definitely a fundamental principle in Stoic philosophy, and it's definitely a fundamental principle of Creative on Purpose, starting with gratitude and recognizing that everything that we are doing is about choice, and that regardless of our situation and circumstances, regardless of the obstacles, misfortunes, and anything else that's getting in our way, there's always choices. And we can, when we are present and when we are intentional and when we are thinking and acting in alignment with our integrity, can frame any situation in a way that creates positive options. Now, I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm not saying that, if you just endured a natural disaster, if you've just lost a loved one, that there's a way to frame that in a way that's optimistic. But even in those worst moments, when there's maybe literally nothing that you can do to quote unquote make things better in that moment, you still have the option or the opportunity to practice the virtues of patience, of humility, of acceptance, and to cultivate the virtue of resilience. And so even those worst moments provide opportunities for you to develop and kind of cultivate your excellence of character, as the Stoics would refer to it. So for me, that is at the heart of it, is the idea that we actually are, well, the Stoics would say, Epictetus' famous line that begins the Enchiridion, which is his handbook, is happiness is basically based on accepting 2 things. Some things are in our control and some things are not. What's in our control are the things I just mentioned. We have agency over our thoughts, and we have agency over our actions, what we do next. everything else is outside of our control. I like to add that in between those two poles, there are many places where we can exert influence. So yes, I cannot control the weather. So if I experience a natural disaster, that's totally beyond my control. But if I'm having difficulty with Jurgen, I can have a conversation. I can do something about that situation. I can decide how I'm going to frame the situation or the problem that we're having. I'm going to be able to choose amongst an array of options that might allow us to make things better in that moment. And so for me, it's assuming agency and committing to action and committing to doing both of those things in a way that is in alignment with our values and with the idea that we're trying to make things better.
Yeah, there's a lot I love about that. I mean, it basically comes down to taking responsibility for, as you said, your behavior and your thoughts. And also, to me, it's a little bit like if something happens that's beyond your control, spend your time working on how are you going to respond to that? First of all, what are you going to make that mean? So if we have a misunderstanding, I could make that mean that Scott doesn't like me, or Scott thinks badly of me, or Scott wants something bad to happen to me. So that would be a reaction for people that kind of go in a downward spiral. Or I could make it mean that, you've got an agenda that I wasn't aware of, or you've communicated in a way that I didn't understand. And so then I can choose to react differently to that. And I can choose to have a conversation with you and explore why we've had that misunderstanding. So that, to me, that's taking responsibility for your beliefs and your responses to whatever's happening. Obviously, if it's a bigger thing like the weather event you mentioned, that's tough as well. But I see, that there's often amazing stories that come out of that, and always there are people who've said, well, this has happened, and I can feel sorry for myself, or I can say, well, how can I now recover from this? What can I do to make my situation better? What can I do to help other people? Which is always the one that amazes me, particularly in really bad situations where people have lost loved ones to really shocking diseases or something, that there are people that then have the ability to say, well, how can we educate others about the dangers of this, or how can we fundraise to support research to make sure nobody else has to go through this. So they're the things where I think it's people taking responsibilities for their action and not letting the world sort of cause their misfortune.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about in a previous conversation was this idea of how changing our minds. That of course, if you were to have lost a son or daughter to a terrible disease or to gun violence or any of anything like that, you would be totally within your rights to be traumatized and to be in grief, but that doesn't surprise us, and that's not something that any of us are saying, well, that person just needs to get over that and move on with their lives. No. What we do see from time to time is, the mother who loses herself to violence and forgives the killer and is a force for good in the world and is a force for, trying to bring an end to the proliferation of guns in schools, or, just does whatever is necessary to try to bring more peace into the world. And, this idea about changing our mind is the conversation that we had. I think what I said was, well, changing your mind is actually really simple. The problem is that simple things are never easy to do.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, for some people, it does come a little bit more naturally. Some people are able to recover quickly from trauma and to frame things in a way that allows them to, see things from a healthier perspective and leads them more quickly to a happier perspective. And some people struggle more with that. But the fact of the matter is that it is possible. And, it's the kind of activity that's worth all of us engaging with on a deeper level and helping each other with. The idea that, we can all be stepping into a better possibility, and we can be promoting the health, happiness, and well-being of each other along the way.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your philosophy of delivering better endeavours and enhancing your life through endeavours that elevate the lives of others. So I'm guessing that most of your community would be in small business.
There are a lot of people that are that are small business owners, and some that are employees of businesses large and small. A lot of entrepreneurs or people that aspire to be engaged in some sort of freelance or entrepreneurial enterprise. There are pure creatives in the sense of musicians or artists, people in alternative health, and a fair amount really of professionals, people that are doctors and dentists and lawyers and accountants and people that work in corporations. I think that the unifying factor is less about where they do their work and more about how they want to excel in work that they feel is important, that is meaningful, and that is helping make a difference in the world.
So a pretty broad audience. So how do you start with them in terms of that objective of helping them deliver better endeavours?
I would say that the two most common approaches are, there are people that are really ready to find an endeavor worthy of their time and talents, but are having difficulty finding that. And so I have developed a very straightforward process. It's a Venn diagram with 3 circles, and it basically just helps you define who you are, what you're good at, and where you belong. And who you are, I define as your values, your guiding principles, your core values that you can identify just by taking something like the values in action strengths indicator. Your core talents are less about your hard skills, although you can include those, the hard skills that you learn in school or on the job, but more about your soft skills, more about your EQ and the kind of interpersonal skills that you've been developing since you were a kid. And then where you belong is simply with people that share your values and need your talents to either enhance their lives or to serve as collaborators in meaningful work. And the intersection of those 3 things is where you're likely to find your next endeavor, or at least some ideas that you can start to try and test and take baby steps into exploring. And then the other group would be people that are, feel that they have found their endeavor, the work that they're meant to be doing now, but are somehow stuck. And with that group, and I say this as a person that finds himself in that group all the time, the thing that's usually getting in your way in terms of leveling up and making progress in an endeavor that makes a difference is the person that stares back at you in the mirror when you wake up every morning. And so, I'm not offering counseling or, there's no psychology here or therapy. It's just helping people see what they don't yet see, because I know that once we can see it together, that they will not be able to unsee it. And then we know what the problem really is. And then we can start to develop solutions that will get them to either overcome whatever it is that, whatever fear, resistance, or whatever else is holding them back. Or we can take what appears to be an obstacle or a disadvantage and flip it into some sort of advantage. And, quite frankly, sometimes people have mistaken a dream that they have as the thing that they're supposed to be doing. But one of the reasons that they're not achieving is that it's not really the thing that lights them up. It's actually something that is exhausting them. And through conversation, I will often find something that's really exciting them and just simply say, you say you want to do this over here, but every time I hear you talk about this over here, you sound like a kid that's, about to open his Christmas present. So can we just sit here for a minute and explore like what this might look like if you unpacked it? So those are the two primary situations that I find myself in as a coach or a workshop leader.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, that we find it so hard to see some of the things that others immediately see in us when they ask the right questions or have that conversation. And I was in a workshop over the weekend. I was facilitating a session there, and one of the participants raised something and was really stuck. I mean, basically admitted they were stuck in terms of finding the thing that they really wanted to do next. And I asked about 3 questions, I think, and then pretty well the entire audience came to the same conclusion as I was and said, "Oh, what about this thing? Sounds like you're really excited by that. Why don't you explore that some more?" And so,
the honest to God truth is, you and I are as bad at this as the people that we work with most of the time. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times somebody, I gave the example of Seth Godin. I saw things in a way that I was quite sure was right. Seth looked at it and saw that I was quite wrong, and even had the generosity to say so. And I, was not willing to see it in that moment, but, eventually did come around. And so, part of the work that I think you and I both do is to deliver this medicine with empathy and compassion, and in a way that, is of service to the person that we're working with, and that is going to help them, which is going to help all of us, because, we need to be engaged in work that lights us up and that promotes not only the thriving and flourishing of others, but the thriving and flourishing of the person doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where they do their best work. If they're, that's where I do my best work, when I'm having a ball, when I'm thriving and flourishing.
Yeah, well, a really important premise, I think, of an endeavor is that, we think that there are certain jobs that purpose and passion is kind of intrinsically inherent in the work. And if that were true, every doctor, lawyer, and accountant on the planet would be thrilled to be doing the work that they're doing. And if you know any doctors, lawyers, or accountants, you know that there are just as many unhappy doctors, lawyers, and accountants as there are, secretaries and employees and garbage men, right? So at the same time, what does really purpose and passion and meaning come through doing any work that's in front of you with intention and integrity. So yes, there are thriving, flourishing doctors, lawyers, and accountants, but there are also thriving and flourishing employees and secretaries and people picking up your garbage, because they are bringing that work is, or the purpose, passion, and meaning is coming through the way that they're doing that work. So for me, a lot of what I am trying to do is just help people not only identify their endeavor, but identify or cultivate a mindset and an approach to doing that work that will continue to cultivate passion and purpose, because then it can become a renewable resource that continues to fuel their forward progress in developing that work and connecting with others in a way that's promoting everybody's well-being.
Yeah, and it gives them energy as well, I think, if it's in that space. All right, well, we've talked a lot about the mindset around a creative endeavour, and I know you're very strong, because mindset is just one part of it. It's a really important part of it, but then taking action is the next big important one. And I know you have this smallest viable model. So tell us a little bit about that, because I was fascinated by that. Often I get overwhelmed, just like all of us do, I think, from time to time. And you look at something and it's a massive big thing that you need to accomplish or you want to accomplish and you need to do, and you kind of procrastinate over it because it just overwhelms you. So I really like your approach. So give us a bit of a snapshot of the smallest viable approach.
So the go small approach is just this idea, excuse me, we have dogs in the house here, is based on identifying three things: the smallest viable step, the smallest viable audience that comes directly from Seth Godin's work, and then the smallest viable offer, or what some people call the minimum viable offering. The smallest viable step is this idea that we rarely hit home runs when we're taking swings at some sort of endeavor. We usually find that it's a number of bunts and base hits that are drip by drip moving us forward and helping us make progress. So instead of thinking of the next big thing that you need to be building, just the first step is let's find the very next step, the thing that you can do today that will help you step into this possibility that you're imagining. So, you should have a vision for the world that you want to live in. You should have a mission about how you're going to bring that world into existence. You should have goals that are moving you toward that vision. But as you're stepping toward that goal, you also want to make sure that you're aware of the possibilities and opportunities and challenges and obstacles that you don't see when you first get started, because there may be better ways that are availing themselves through either the opportunities or the challenges. And so this daily practice of what can I do today, right in this moment, to step into the possibility that I imagine, and then to take that step and then to assess the situation as it is now and decide to frame it and then decide what the next step is. So that's the first step. The second step, the smallest viable audience, is you cannot change the world, turns out, but you can probably change the person that's sitting right in front of you. So instead of trying to fill a funnel with thousands of people that you can, force through some sort of leaky funnel so that you come to the 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 that you need to sustain your livelihood through whatever it is that you're selling, simply start with what Seth Godin calls the first 10. Can you find 10 people that are willing to, that trust you, who have given you permission to connect with them, who are enrolled in the journey that you want to take them on, and who will invest in that journey, going on that journey with you? And then when you had those two, when you had the mindset of the smallest viable step and you've acquired the smallest viable audience, then simply come up with an offer. It doesn't have to be a speech. It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be a business. It doesn't have to be a product. It has to be something that you can create a landing page for with a buy now button. So, and if you get 10 people to sign up and pay you to do this little project that you can build out in a day or a weekend, then you have proven viability right away, and you can start working towards sustainability, which is, the greater process. So the idea that we make progress, day by day, step by step, drip by drip, by following this list of smallest viable step, smallest viable audience, and smallest viable offer, has worked very well for me. And I say that as someone who has tried many times to build big courses, big businesses. I've done retail. I had owned a music store at one point. I built a 50 lesson guitar course. All those things cost me an immense amount of time, energy, and effort, and did not deliver, the financial results that were required to keep them going. Whereas the smallest step approach has, in just 2.5, 3 years, brought, Creative on Purpose from a bad idea to a sustainable and viable brand that's growing every single day.
Yeah, there's so much to love about that. I mean, I'm a big fan of the smallest viable audience concept that Seth Godin puts out in his book, This Is Marketing. And I'm also a huge fan of the lean model, which essentially is the smallest viable offer. So you put something out there and test do you have people that would pay money for that before you actually put the work in to do it? So rather than build a 50 lesson course you talked about, that I imagine for an online course with videos and scripting and recording and editing is a massive amount of work, and then to find out that it's actually not what people want or what they'll pay for.
One subscription. So 2 years of my life, I made $100.
Yeah,
Lesson learned.
So the better option is to set up a landing page, sell the course with an outline and a kind of an overview of what it would contain. And if nobody buys it, well, then you haven't spent the time producing something that nobody will buy, even if you have produced it. Whereas if you do get those 10 people buying, well, then, if it is the smallest viable offer, then it's something, as Scott said, you could put together in a day or a weekend.
Exactly.
And if you're open about that, people are quite responsive to those, I find. If you're open to that up front and say, buy now, you'll get early access. It will be available then, so that you give yourself time to produce it. Should you get the required number of people actually saying, yes, I want it, then it does work. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
And the smallest viable step was something that I kind of discovered through, I think you interviewed someone, I can't recall her name at the moment, and I thought that's a really good way to kind of back off, because I often ask myself when I get to this procrastination thing, well, what's the next step I can do? So to kind of think of it in a slightly different way and say, well, what's the smallest thing I can do to move forward, I think is a really good way to unblock.
Well, it's cultivating this bias to action that's really required. Nobody ever changed anybody with thinking about a big idea. Nobody's ever really changed somebody else's mind or made change happen by just talking about it. Change always happens through action, and action is what earns us trust, which is required before we can get permission and enrollment and investment. So the bias to action is the big part of that, starting with the smallest viable step. You have to be in motion, stepping into possibility, with work done with and for other people, if you are going to make any meaningful change, not just in the change that you seek to make through your product or service, but developing and cultivating excellence, in yourself as a human being and as somebody that's trying to be a force for good in the world.
All right. Great, Scott. Well, we've explored a lot of topics there, and I'm looking at the time, so I think it's a good point to move ahead with our buzz round, which is our innovation round designed to help our audience, and they're primarily innovators and leaders in their field, and get some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions, and hopefully you'll give us some really insightful answers that'll inspire people to go and do something awesome today.
I will do my best, and if I can't come up with a good answer, I'll come up with some sort of BS that sounds good. How's that?
All right. We'll see. Okay, let's start with number 1, which is, what's the thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Accept that you are creative. Surveys say worldwide that less than 50% of human beings self-identify as creative beings, and that is sad, but it's also delusional. The only things that you have ever learned that are important, you learned by being creative. When you wanted to learn how to talk as an infant, you fearlessly babbled until you came out with words, and then you continued to put together really bad sentences until you could put together really good sentences. These are acts of creation. Creativity is merely the act of bringing something forth into the world that didn't exist before you did it or created it. This can be a conversation, this can be an email, this can be a sandwich, this can be the Mona Lisa or the David. But creativity is simply engaging in the human activity of making change happen by bringing something into the world that hadn't there before existed. And when we stop telling ourselves the harmful stories that are getting in the way of us acting on our creative impulse and start remembering the fearless creatives that we once were, you will find yourself more creative, and creativity is at the heart of innovation. If you can't make things better until you start making things.
Yeah, that's great advice. Love that answer. Okay, well, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Meaning like a personal practice or the best ideas?
Well, it could be a personal practice, or it could be a product, or we've talked a lot about the business creative on purpose.
I think that for me, the thing that moved the needle for me in terms of productivity and in terms of working on my best ideas, or getting rid of bad ideas quickly, is I write a to-do list at the beginning of every morning, and I'm a very early riser, so this is often 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But I write a list of all the things that I could be working on today. I always, they're always about the project that I'm currently working on. And after I write down that list, I always go through and I select the one thing that I'm going to get done that day, and I do my best to, Pareto principle down to the thing that will move my endeavor along the furthest and the fastest. But these are things that I can achieve in a day or a morning or a moment, and I simply make sure that that's the first thing that gets done. And by doing something to move my project forward every day, my project moves forward every day. Or if I try something that doesn't work, I know that it's something I need to either tweak or I need to drop so I can move on to the next, best thing on tomorrow's list. So for me, that fuels both creativity and productivity.
That's a great way to do it. I love that idea of identifying the one thing, and then at the end of the day, if you've completed only that one thing and you've got 10 on your to-do list and you haven't completed the other 9, at least the typical to-do list, you have 10 things on the to-do list and they're all equally important and you only complete one of them. So you beat yourself up because you've only done 1 out of the 10. Whereas if you've identified the one thing that's absolutely a must, is most important today, that will move the needle the furthest, and you complete that one and don't do the other 9, it's a totally different feeling.
Absolutely.
All right. Do you have a favorite resource that you use most often?
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Marcus speaks to me every day. One of the great things about Stoic philosophy, and especially the writing of Marcus Aurelius, is that that they are like little aphorisms, little actionable anecdotes. They're friendly reminders. They're calls to action. They're exercises throughout meditations that come to mind, not just every day, but almost in every moment of every day. I am reminded of something that I've read in meditations that helps me either contextualize a situation that needs me to zoom out and contextualize, or reframe a situation that needs to be reframed, or just reminds me that my time here is limited and that I should be making the most of it. One of my favorite quotes of his is, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now go and live the rest of it properly." And I think about that every single day because I go for my daily exercise at the local cemetery where I run 5 miles every day, and I'm surrounded by a reminder that this is where I end up. And it is not depressing to me at all, but it's a very passionate reminder to me that I need to make the most of the gifts that I have access to and the assets that I have access to while I have them.
All right, that's great advice. So the meditation with Marcus Aurelius and the conscious awareness, that is a pretty challenging quote, isn't it? But the conscious awareness of that we all have.
You don't have to start with that one.
We won't. We all have limited access or limited time on this planet and in this life, so make the most of it. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track when you've started working with them? And
that's a great question. one of the things that I found to be very powerful is to just be honest with clients when things are not working out. I mean, if somebody, I am interested in helping people move forward, and that requires that they are willing to engage, that they are willing to lean into the challenge together, and that they're willing to, have a conversation and discuss the possibility, but then they must be willing to take that step. And, I do my best through assessments and kind of preliminary interviews to make sure that I'm working with the kind of person that's ready to make progress. But if I find myself working with a client that seems to, be doing their level best to continue to stay stuck or stay stalled or to get themselves in binds, then I am pretty quick to just say, maybe this is not the best time for you and I to be working together, because I'm interested in helping people move forward. So, and that can sound harsh and like it's a tough conversation to have. But what I have found is that it's very clarifying. And sometimes people say, you're calling me out on something that I need to deal with, and I'm going to, now we will lean in and do this work together. And sometimes people say, you know what, you're actually really quite right. I'm really not ready for this right now. And I have no problem helping direct them to somebody that I think might be able to be, might be better positioned to help them with the conversations going on in their head or with their current situation or circumstances. And fate permitting, I will still be around if and when they decide that they're ready to come back in and lean into the work that we got started. So, I don't consider that tough love. I call that real love, because what I'm really doing is trying to help them get where they've told me that they want to go, and usually where we've decided, where we're both clear that they want to go. But they're either ready or they're not, and if they're ready, let's go, and if they're not, let's find someone that can help you get to that point.
All right, that's great. Yeah, so really honesty and transparency around what's keeping people stuck, and also what the best way forward is, and
Absolutely.
Even to the extent that it may be that they go work with somebody else, or they're not ready to take this on right now. All right, what's the number one thing you think anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Ooh, that is a really good question. For me, one of the basic principles of the creative on purpose approach to identifying and developing and delivering better endeavors is to not start with why. Now, I love Simon Sinek's work. I love the TED Talk. It has been a source of insight and inspiration for sure, but I don't agree that we need to start with why, and I don't agree that there's only one thing that we've been put on this planet to do. I believe that we are all works in progress, that we all go through seasons of life, and at different points we are prepared and better suited to do different things. And what we need to do is not start with why, but start with who, and the starting with who starts with you. You need to know who you are. What are your guiding principles? What are your core talents and skills? And when you've put in the effort to really do some hard thinking and choose those things, then you can surround yourself with people who share those values and who need your talents to help them move forward. And you will be better situated to find a why in whatever you decide it is that you're going to do. Purpose is not in that work. It comes through doing whatever work is right in front of you. So for me, it's start with who.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, comes back to the self-awareness we've been talking about earlier. All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz. That was great. And this has been fantastic conversation, Scott, so I really appreciate it. Now, where can people reach out to find out more about you, and maybe even reach out and say thank you for what you've shared today?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I love to hear from people that are tuning into the podcast that I appear on. You can type in creativeonpurpose.com or becreativeonpurpose.com into your browser, and Creative on Purpose will pop right up. You can also just Google Creative on Purpose. It will be the first thing that comes up. If you put in just Scott Perry, it used to be that I would come up, but it turns out that there's a basketball coach, and a professional basketball coach, and a member of the House of Representatives with the same name. And it seems that washed up musicians can't compete with professional basketball coaches and politicians. But if you put my name in alongside Creative on Purpose, it will also come up. If you decide to go to creativeonpurpose.com, please take a look at the blog, take a look at the current episode of the broadcast. By all means, feel free to sign up for a free copy of the Creative on Purpose Handbook. There's often some other kind of free training on offer there. My newsletter goes out 3 times a week. Each time it's a 2-minute read, and it rarely is, it never is selling anything. It is full of insight and information, and occasionally, if there is some sort of special offer for the coaching, that will appear, but that usually is quarterly. And yeah, I love, I have a great relationship with my newsletter list. My emails get opened up at a rate of greater than 30%, which is a good indication to me that, based on the usual numbers, that the people that are signing up are connecting with the message and getting some value for it. So if you'd like to join our little community, feel free to do it there.
Great. And we'll post links to that on the show notes so that people can click straight through. So what's the number one piece of advice you'd give anyone who wants to be a leader in innovation and a leader in their field?
Take a small step into possibility every day. Just define what that possibility is, have an aim or an end in mind, a goal, and then step towards that possibility, pay attention to what happens, and then in the next moment, frame what's going on and what the next possibilities are, and then choose the next one, and just keep leaning in and stepping into possibility. That's how change happens. That's how we remain connected, and that's how we inspire each other to make things better.
Great advice. Thanks, Scott. And finally, who would you like me to chat with on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Oh boy, well, there have been so many great guests on my podcast. I guess you can't really interview yourself. So I tell you, so obviously I've had Seth on the broadcast a few times, and he's always a brilliant interview. Some of the most brilliant conversations I've had recently that have not been you or Seth have been with Sheila Heen, who wrote the book Difficult Conversations, and with Jane Bettle, who is also involved in the business of helping people with difficult conversations. Her business is Dovetail Resolutions. I think we live in difficult times where the only way forward is by engaging in conversations worth having, and those conversations are often difficult. So I've been really intrigued by that kind of work. So Sheila and Jane are both doing great work in that domain.
All right. Well, we'd love to have Seth on the podcast, but he is I have had a conversation with him. He is taking a bit of a hiatus at the moment, so
he does
stay
this
tuned.
From time to time.
We might resume that conversation in a little while, but we'll reach out to Sheila and Jane and get them on the podcast. I do recall Sheila's conversation with you, so that I'm certainly excited to talk to her. I'm not sure I listened to Jane's one, but I will go and do that, and look forward to getting both of them on.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us today on the InnovaBuzz podcast, Scott. I really appreciate you spending time with me, and really enjoyed this conversation and learned a lot in particular about your approach to kind of identifying people's passion and getting them moving, and the smallest viable approach. I love that. So I wish you all the best for the future, and let's keep in touch.
So you're going to want to just make sure that I give you your proper due in terms of the great work that you're doing, the difference that you're making in the world. This was a great conversation because you asked great questions, and it's been the highlight of my weekend, and I hope that your listeners get some value out of it. But I deeply appreciate your bringing me on, but also and giving me some of your time and attention. But the work that you're doing really is making a difference, and it is appreciated. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Scott. I hope you enjoyed that insightful and informative conversation with Scott and took something away today from his episode. Scott's focus on service and making a difference by making change to your smallest viable audience, and the way he structures the actionable steps were highlights for me. I'd love to know what you took away from Scott's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Scott Perry. That is SCOTTPERRY. All lowercase, or one word, innovabiz.co/Scott Perry. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Scott there, as well as links to the Creative on Purpose website, his social media pages, and the other resources we spoke about in today's conversation. Scott suggested that we get Sheila Heen, author of Difficult Conversations, and Jane Beddle of Dovetail Resolutions on future InnovaBuzz podcast episodes for a conversation. So Sheila and Jane, keep an eye on your inboxes for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Scott Perry. Remember to check out our Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It's completely free and you can access it without even giving away your email. In less than 30 minutes, you'll gain absolute clarity about your ideal client and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. And if you'd like our help to go even deeper into marketing mastery, or our help with podcast production, then send me an email to jurgen@innovabiz.co and we'll set up a quick call just to have a conversation and find out if we're a good fit for one another. Tune in again next week to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got more fantastic guests lined up, including Sonia McDonald, leadership coach and author, and Azul Taronas of the Authors Writing Academy. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the InnovaBuzz podcast at innovabuzz.com/subscribe. innovabuzz.com/subscribe. Make sure you never miss another episode. It would also mean a lot to me if you leave us a review, because what you think matters. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, or questions you have, so go ahead and share them in the comments below the blog post for this episode. Until next time, I'm Jurgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.